Death and dying. Let's talk about it in Season 2 of MC4P. I'm your host, Wren Ribeiro. Could these end-of-life conversations lead to a greater sense of joy, of peace?
For all eternity.
Tune in and find out. Mujeres Co-Labor for Peace.
Hi, Patti. Welcome to Mujeres Co-Labor for Peace. So nice to see your face and get to know you through your work and this second season of MC4P on peaceful dying. How are you today?
I'm doing great, and I'm glad to get to meet you visually, if not in physical person. So that's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. So let's just jump right into something that we do on this show. It's this heart here is one of my companions. I have a new idea of a companion, of a skeleton wearing a top hat and a black jacket and a bow tie, but he's at AAA with my car right now.
I could have brought some of my death attire skeleton stuff.
Oh my gosh, I'd love to hear about that. But before we get too deep into our fantastic show details, I'd love to do a heart check-in. It's something that we do at each episode. It helps me to ground and hopefully the guest as well. And so it's just like take a breath and check in with your heart and our audience as well. How is your heart? At the moment, my heart is feeling pretty buzzy and really excited about this conversation. How about you, Patti?
I'm also a little buzzy because I just gotten back from another appointment, and I'm excited for this conversation too.
Nice. Well, Patti Muldoon, how would you like to introduce yourself as a death doula and all the other things that you do in the sector of peaceful dying? We'll just brand it that way, right?
Love it. Peaceful dying. Beautiful. Well, I am president of the Funeral Consumers Alliance of Eastern Massachusetts and Central, and I know you're in Western. So we have another wonderful organization, sister organization there as well. I am also, as you mentioned, a death doula or end-of-life doula. And I am also the aging resources coordinator for New England Quakers. So I have 3 hats that all feed each other in this world.
That's fantastic. So I want to ask you some questions and get into some of the detail about your work and this idea of dying with peace and like putting more energy and attention into end of life. So I'm wondering, in your opinion, why do you think American society, if you think this, has such a hard time being real about death? Why do we kind of like get nervous around the idea of no longer being alive? It's kind of inevitable, right?
Death denial, the name of
Death denial.
Leading book in this whole area. But yes, we have had a very hard time looking at our oncoming death, that we are, as we live, hopefully as fully as we can, we are also dying, and most of us have no idea when, but it has become very hard to look at. Some of that is manufactured. So these days, there's been so much medicalization of healthcare that rather than dying at home, very often people may be dying in a facility, a hospital, an assisted care facility. Very, very often, that's where death occurs. So we're given some distance from it. Do we take care of the body, or does the institution do that? And we're literally pushed out of the room to, yes, this is now our domain. And then funeral homes contribute to that with professionalizing end-of-life care, death care, and we're further and further and further away from tending our own dead friends and family, and even if someone is to be buried, they cover the mound of dirt with some fake grass, and you're not there most of the time for the actual burial. They shoo the family away. So some of it is how we've been influenced by the institutions that we've helped create. And it goes much deeper than that, but I really can't speak to all the psychological issues that we have around facing our death. But it is very challenging for most of us to live, in effect, with death on our shoulder.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, even beyond the psychological factors of all of that, the very logistical and real factors of being, like shuffled away when you're grieving, like that has got to add trauma to the existing trauma of losing a loved one. So, I'm curious to know, like, what you do to comfort or prepare for those moments, to avoid them and to kind of get around some of that. I love that term, medicalization of healthcare. It makes it a little bit more understandable because we're feeling it, and let's just understand it as a term, medicalization of healthcare. What do you do to mitigate some of that?
Some very, very basic things. Having difficult conversations, not leaving it up to our doctors to initiate and have those difficult conversations about what do you want for your end-of-life care. Do you want us to try and do everything we can? Because usually there's one more intervention we could take. Or do you want to die more naturally and perhaps a little bit more on your own terms? So the whole concept of fighting death is something that's very much in our healthcare system and in our mentality. So are we fighting? And at what point do we say, the best thing for me is to stop fighting and accept the inevitable and make that as smooth a transition and as healing for me and as growth-filled for me as I can? Because it's an amazing time of life as we're approaching end of life. This is assuming it's not a traumatic end, but something that can be foreseen. Most old people, most deaths are a gradual step down process into greater degrees of frailty. But there are also many other kinds of death. The unexpected suicides and overdoses and car accidents. There are many other kinds of death. And frankly, we all need to do some work to prepare for that. And that means being open to having these challenging conversations and to lay aside some of the busyness. Well, I've got this deadline, I have to get this done, and do, and think more about being and allow that time to open itself up so that we can have those conversations with ourselves about what am I afraid of? What do I want? What do I hope for? And to have those with others who might be there to help care for us.
Yeah. I mean, that definitely feels like a step in the right direction toward bringing more peace to the end of life, for sure. So many years ago, my partner and I hosted a death cafe in our home. We had 8 couples from the neighborhood that committed. I think it was only 7 that actually ended up committing to showing up every Tuesday for about 6 weeks. We shared thoughts and concerns, lots of resources. I learned a lot in this process. And we inspired each other to live just a bit more on purpose, because like having those conversations really allowed for motivation to make more of each day. And when you and I spoke a couple of weeks ago, you'd mentioned a death salon and taking an end-of-life training by an Los Angeles attorney, Alua Arthur. What are one or two things that you learned in her Going with Grace program?
Oh, she's a very vibrant, amazing woman and has become a national speaker and advocate for intentional end-of-life care with doula training. And I met her here at Mount Auburn Cemetery in Cambridge. And she's just this amazing African-American woman who lives in LA. So yeah, I was drawn to her, inspired to her. We had some private conversations while she was physically here, and then I joined her training. And although she focuses a lot of her work on supporting folks, people in the majority, BIPOC and LGBTQ plus, she also has done a lot of training with those of us who don't fit into those categories. And I can share one story that has really stood out ever since that training. We watched a video of a Japanese couple where the man and the woman were both doctors running a hospice program. And the man was dying. And they had agreed that he didn't want any interventions, no CPR, none of those interventions. He was already in the process of dying, and he knew something would happen. Maybe he would stop breathing. And they were in total agreement. And when the time came, his wife of many years called in and required the CPR, which broke some of his ribs and brought him back to life for a little bit. And she did the exact opposite of everything they had agreed to and been comfortably talking about. I was blown away. And what that taught me is even if you think you're prepared as you could be, you may not be, and your wishes at the end may diverge from the one you're taking care of. And it was the most shocking thing. The death care, all of that, none of that was shocking, but her decision to go against her husband's wishes, I found really shocking, and just helped me understand how hard it is to let our loved one go, even if we think we're prepared. So I'm prepared for people fighting, whether it is the person dying or whether it is perhaps their loved ones.
Yeah. Wow. That's a really great story. I appreciate you sharing that. It brings me back to a lot of experiences with losing loved ones, and we've got my partner has someone who's really close to, and who's going through this process, and it's being very, very difficult. So I appreciate you bringing that emotionality in. And I had also watched Alua's video and appreciated that it included caring for the body immediately after death. You spoke about that a little bit as well, and I'm wondering if you have any insights on, or like the one thing that you think is really important for everybody to know or to do in preparation for death. If there's just one thing that we all should know, what would that be?
Okay, so we're going to move away from caring for the body and back to preparing for death. And yes, I do have a one thing. Get your healthcare proxy in order. Your representative to speak for when you cannot speak. So it's the easiest thing to do, particularly here in Massachusetts. You can just look up Healthcare Proxy Massachusetts, receive the form. It just takes 2 witnesses. The challenges are in choosing who that is and what you tell them you want to do. So Can you choose someone who's a fighter for you? Can the loved ones actually follow your wishes if you want to die naturally? Can they avoid calling the ambulance? Don't call if you want to allow that person to die naturally. Those are challenging things. And you need to figure out, well, do I want to be put on a ventilator, or do I want it for a trial period or longer? You need to know what to tell that healthcare proxy. So filling out the form is by far the easiest thing you could possibly do. Figuring out what to put on the form and who to choose, those are difficult. And of course, let me put in a caveat, you need to have a substitute, a backup person, if the first person isn't able to serve in that role. You can't reach them for, not you, but the medical providers,
Right.
reach them or whatever. So making those choices ahead of time, only about a third of older Americans do it, and the numbers are way worse for folks who are younger. But filling out your healthcare proxy and thinking about what you want and who you want seems like, it's just this little 2-page form. I just need a couple of witnesses. Very easy to fill out the form, very hard to figure out what to put there. So that's what my strong recommendation is.
Oh, that's such a good recommendation. I remember I didn't know what a healthcare proxy was until my mom died. I became her healthcare proxy because I was the closest in proximity. And I don't remember having the conversation. Her cancer was pretty advanced. So when it was my turn to be a healthcare proxy for my dad, the only thing that I remember putting on that form is that he wanted to be resuscitated. He was in a assisted living or nursing home, and that was a real bone of contention. And it's a story for another day. But they were angry that he didn't allow them to do the DNR, the do not resuscitate, because it just makes their life a lot easier when someone is at the end. But my dad wanted to hold on as long as possible, and so that's the one thing I remember. I think that the process of signing that healthcare proxy motivated me to have conversations that we might not otherwise have had, and they didn't go great. But I think that's really the nugget or the core of my motivation for this particular series on peaceful dying is to give people that gift of conversation, to prepare their hearts, if to the extent that's possible, to prepare loved ones for the inevitable or the conversation around it, and to celebrate what were the most memorable moments of your life, and how do you want to be remembered. And I can't imagine that those questions are in the form, but they are questions that I imagine that you have with your clients.
Absolutely. Yeah, those are the beautiful, beautiful questions. I'm not sure they're easier questions, but those are the beautiful questions of what is your legacy to this world that you're stepping beyond. And kudos to you, Wren, for serving in that difficult capacity and for having those questions and conversations with your dad.
Thank you. Thank you.
It is hard work.
It really is, because there's not just the paper, the document that you said. There's all the other things that go along with it. There's assets, like what do you do with things? Like I've heard horror stories about the way lack of preparation can turn into kind of a free-for-all in some families, or just like a lot of important things just going into the dumpster or something like that. And those are all very real and important parts of the process of winding down one's life, I think. But as a midwife or midwifing others, what joys or stories do you have that are really nourishing to you in being a death doula and supporting others in their dying?
People, I suspect, might think that this is just really sad work. And that's not been my experience. There's certainly a lot of sadness losing someone. That's part of loving. That's part of living. And if we really love someone, then grief is inevitable for various losses that we have. But unexpected things. I have one person that I was taking care of who lived in a residential hospice for a year. And I was with her when she got her terminal diagnosis, and she breezed through it. Like, I've lived through so much. I don't need to extend my life. I accept my death. She was so joyful. She was in the bed all the time and joyful, living life. And after she died, one of the hospice volunteers came to me and said, she's taught me how to live as well as how to die. With her heart opening up. So the transition time can be a time of amazing growth and healing. And if you've got notice that it's coming, you have that opportunity to do those legacy gifts. I'm going to stick with the same person. She didn't feel she had been a good mother. She hadn't been mothered well herself and had regrets for how she was a mother. And so in our conversations, I wrote things down. I drafted it into a letter. I read it back to her. She made some changes. And then I was able to mail that to her children. And it was an opportunity for her to express her love, her sorrow at not having been a better mom to them, and just carried it forth. And she got to say those words. And that was a major component of, that was her legacy gift to her children.
Wow. I am so grateful for you sharing that, for being there for her, that last minute, like, here's what's on my heart, and I really need to share that with my family, and you made that happen. I just love that. I think that is, to me, in my mind, the epitome of care, at end of life care, of being able to do that, witnessing and kind of be that liaison with the family. I think about how my mom did not keep journals, did not really share how she was feeling about things, the generation, how she was raised, whatnot. I, on the other hand, keep so many journals that my kids are going to be on the other extreme, saying she's just so much to say, and it's like all here, and how do they process that? So that's the end of the other end of the spectrum conversation. But having those questions answered, or having some kind of closure, right? It's like it's real and it's meaningful. So it's a beautiful story.
May I add?
Hope. Oh, please. Yeah.
Thank you. That we don't need to wait till we're dying to do that kind of healing work, by the way. Mm-hmm. But when you're dying and you have nothing else to do, and that is weighing on your heart, then that is the most natural time to do it. But I just want to encourage people to consider doing some of this work and healing work sooner rather than later. I guess that's the whole long story, is do some advanced planning and address the things that might have your heart closed, and find a way to do that healing while you still can, because none of us know when we're going to go. Don't wait.
So true, so true. And that allows us to live more fully each moment with our relations, all of our relations, that if there's a block, just kind of work it out. I'm a huge proponent of that and in agreement with you there. So I was going to say, one of the things that I'm hoping to do with this series is to interview people, maybe hospice workers, women who are with folks in that transition period, and do some video work with them in the same way that you did that letter writing. So keep that in mind if there's someone that you know that could be would love that opportunity. I'm not sure where this season is going to go. You're the first guest here, and hopefully we'll have you back as an expert to answer some questions and things that emerge as the season progresses. Are there any other thoughts and things that you would like to share from your experience before we close out?
I think we struggle in this country with accepting death, that any little steps that we take, whether you want to deal with the death deck and play it with cards with interesting questions, or anything that helps, little steps along the way, because frankly, the work is never done. The healthcare proxy is a major step, but it's just a step. And really, if I haven't done all the work. So it is a lifelong process, and just take whatever small steps are in front of you that you can take, whether it's being with someone who's very sick, offering them some care and getting more comfortable being around folks who are very ill, or just filling out some forms. Whatever steps you can take them, because you'll have a lot of more steps ahead of you, and we need to support one another in this. It's
Wonderful.
challenging to live and to die.
Yeah. Are there any, what's your website, any resources you want to share? And this episode will be on the YouTube channel InnerFortune 1, so people can see it there. Any other resources that you want to offer?
One simple one that I can offer to folks across Massachusetts is a website, funerals, plural, funerals MA for Massachusetts, funeralsma.org. Is a portal to get to our two Funeral Consumers Alliance organizations. There, if you're interested in how to do natural death care, having a home funeral, or questions that may arise, they're very different websites. Look at both of them, and just explore that one link, funeralsma.org.
Yes, awesome. Well, Patti Muldoon, thank you so much for joining Mujeres Co-Labor for Peace. You are definitely a woman co-laboring with others for peace, and we thank you for your work in the world and for your time here today, and wishing everyone complete wellness and lasting peace. Thanks for joining.